The glass slipped, then shattered across the marble, echoing like a gunshot in the silent $20 million dining room. Ethan Caldwell's jaw tightened, voice low and cutting. "Do you even know what that costs?" One wrong move, and Imani Brooks would lose the only job keeping her lights on. But she didn't apologize, didn't move. She just looked at him, steady, unafraid. The air shifted. Something in his chest, tight, unfamiliar, locked him in place. No one had ever looked at him like that. Not in years. Not since the night everything fell apart. He turned away first, but later, alone, that look followed him, into the dark, into his sleep. Because something about her wasn't right. And he was about to find out why, without realizing what it would cost him. Imani Brooks rinsed her hands in cold water long after her shift ended. The kitchen already dark, the hum of the industrial fridge the only sound left. Her reflection in the stainless steel was faint, blurred, like she had trained herself to be. 2 bus rides later, she stepped into a 1-bedroom apartment where the heat clicked unevenly and the window wouldn't fully close. She set her paycheck on the table without counting it, because she already knew where every dollar had to go. Rent, medication, the rest barely enough. But she still folded half a sandwich into a napkin and left it on the corner of the hallway downstairs. Same spot, every night. For the kid who never asked, only waited. Some people learned to survive by taking. Imani learned to survive by giving, even when it cost her. That was the part no one ever saw. Back at the estate, she moved like she always did, quiet, precise, invisible. But something had shifted. She could feel it in the way Ethan's presence lingered longer than necessary, in the way silence around him no longer felt empty, but watchful. She kept her eyes down, her hands steady, her breath controlled, because attention was dangerous, and she couldn't afford mistakes. Not here, not again. Still, there were moments she couldn't stop, like when she passed the study and heard him pause mid-sentence, just as she walked by. Or when the air tightened, like something unspoken was trying to surface. She ignored it. She had to, because the last time someone looked too closely at her, everything fell apart. And this time, if he started asking questions, he wouldn't just find answers. He'd uncover something she had spent years trying to bury, without realizing how much it would cost her. The Caldwell estate didn't feel like a home. It felt like a statement. Glass walls stretched toward the skyline, marble floors cold enough to echo every step, every breath measured, controlled. Conversations here didn't drift, they were calculated, trimmed to profit margins and power plays. That night, Imani moved through a private dinner event where suits cost more than her yearly rent. Her tray balanced steady as voices floated past her like she wasn't there. Acquisitions, leverage, market dominance. Words spoken casually, like lives weren't attached to them. Ethan Caldwell stood at the center of it all, tailored, composed, untouched. People leaned in when he spoke. They laughed half a second too late, nodded too quickly, orbiting him like gravity was a choice. And yet, when his gaze flickered past Imani, there was no recognition, only distance, like she was part of the furniture he owned. A server beside her whispered under her breath, "Don't make eye contact. They don't like that." Imani didn't respond. She already knew. In rooms like this, invisibility wasn't just expected. It was enforced. Later, in the kitchen, the energy shifted, voices louder, sharper, the staff moving faster, careful not to spill, not to break, not to exist too much. One mistake here didn't just cost money. It cost dignity. Through the open doorway, Imani caught a glimpse of Ethan again. Laughing now, relaxed, a different man than the one who froze under her gaze the night before. It was like the moment never happened. Like she imagined it. That was the gap. Up there, power meant control, perception, silence on your own terms. Down here, silence was survival. But even across that divide, something didn't sit right. Because when Ethan turned slightly, just enough for the light to hit his face, his expression shifted, just for a second. Not cold. Not distant. Something else, something unsettled. And Imani felt it too. A thread, thin but unbreakable, stretching between two worlds that were never meant to touch, without either of them realizing how dangerous that connection was becoming. The room tightened the moment the deal shifted. Voices dropped lower, sharper, the kind of silence that meant something expensive was about to happen. Amani stood at the edge of the private office, tray in hand, waiting for the signal to step forward. Through the half-open glass door, she caught fragments. Final clause, no liability exposure. And then she saw it, just a line on a tablet screen, small, buried, but wrong. Her breath slowed. She'd seen language like that before years ago. The kind that didn't protect, it transferred risk quietly, completely. Ethan stood near the head of the table, fingers resting against the glass, ready to close. One tap, and it would be done. Amani's grip tightened around the tray. Not her place, not her world. One step in, and she could lose everything. The paycheck, the room she barely kept, the fragile routine holding her life together. Behind her, another staff member whispered, "Don't, just don't." Amani didn't move, but the numbers on that screen, the phrasing, it echoed too loudly. Someone would pay for that mistake. Not him, never him. Her heart thudded once, twice. Then she stepped forward. The tray touched the table, too loud in the silence. Every head turned. Ethan's gaze snapped to her, sharp warning. "You're not supposed to." "That clause, it doesn't limit exposure," Amani said, voice steady, cutting through the room before she could stop herself. The air froze. No one moved. A chair creaked somewhere. A man near the window let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. "Excuse me?" Ethan's tone dropped, colder now. Amani felt the weight of it press against her chest, but she didn't step back. "It shifts it," she continued, softer but precise, eyes flicking once to the screen, then back down. "If anything goes wrong, your company carries it, not theirs." A beat, then another, the kind that stretches too long. "Who let her in here?" someone muttered. "She's staff," another voice said, dismissive, already irritated. Ethan didn't look away from her. Not this time. His expression unreadable, but his fingers had stopped moving. "You're interrupting a private negotiation," he said, each word measured. "Do you understand that?" Risk pressed in from every side now. Termination, security, blacklisted, gone. Amani swallowed once, then nodded. "Yes, sir." "Then why are you still speaking?" The question hung there, heavy, expectant. Amani's hands stilled at her sides. Every instinct told her to apologize, to step back, to disappear. But the line on that screen, it didn't fade. "Because it's wrong," she said quietly. The room shifted. Not louder, just colder. A man across the table scoffed, leaning back. "We're taking legal advice from a server now?" Few restrained chuckles followed. Not cruel, just dismissive, like she'd confirmed exactly what they believed. Ethan's jaw tightened. For a second, it looked like he might end it right there, call security, erase the moment. But instead, his eyes flicked, quick, precise, to the clause she'd mentioned. Silence stretched again. Different this time. Tense. Calculating. Someone leaned forward. Another reached for the tablet. Amani felt it. The shift she'd triggered. Too late to undo it now. "Check it," Ethan said finally, voice low. No one argued. Screens moved. Fingers scrolled. The room that had ignored her seconds ago now bent toward the same line she couldn't unsee. Amani stepped back, breath shallow, pulse loud in her ears. She'd crossed it. The line you don't come back from. Behind her, the door felt miles away. "If she's wrong," someone murmured under their breath. Amani didn't finish the thought. She didn't need to, because if she was wrong, she wouldn't just lose her job. She'd lose the only place left that hadn't already shut its doors on her. Without realizing, this moment was about to change everything she'd been trying to protect. The silence didn't break. It fractured. One voice cut through first, sharp, irritated. "This is ridiculous." Another followed, colder, controlled. "We're halting a multi-million-dollar decision because a maid thinks she spotted something?" The word Maid landed harder than anything else. Not loud, but precise. Deliberate. Amani felt it settle into the room, defining her place before she could say another word. Ethan didn't speak. Not yet. His eyes were still on the screen, scanning, calculating, but the delay itself became its own accusation. Time stretched. Every second she stood there felt like standing under a spotlight that only she could feel. Someone exhaled loudly. "Sir, this is exactly why we don't allow staff into sensitive rooms." Another voice, quieter but sharper, leaned in. "This could be intentional. You don't know who she talks to, who she reports to." Amani's breath caught. Not visibly, but deep, controlled. The air felt thinner now. Not just dismissal, suspicion. That was worse. Much worse. "Are you suggesting sabotage?" someone asked. "I'm suggesting we don't know what she is," came the reply. Amani's fingers curled slightly at her sides. She didn't move, couldn't. If she reacted, she'd confirm everything they were already deciding about her. Ethan finally looked up, but not at her. At them. "Enough," he said, voice low, cutting. Just enough to quiet the room. But it didn't defend her. It didn't clear her. It just paused the damage. And sometimes silence from power was louder than accusation. "You," Ethan said, turning to her now. The word wasn't harsh. But it wasn't kind either. It was distant, controlled. "Look at me." Amani hesitated just a fraction, then lifted her gaze. The room shifted again. People noticed, not because she spoke, but because she didn't look afraid. That unsettled them more. Ethan studied her, not as a person but as a variable, a risk. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. Not curiosity. Interrogation. Amani swallowed once. This was the edge. Say too much, she exposes herself. Say too little, she looks guilty. "I read," she said quietly. A few restrained laughs slipped out. "You read?" Someone echoed, amused. "Contracts? In your spare time?" "Maybe she Googled it." Another voice added, dismissive. The room eased slightly, relief disguised as mockery. It was easier to laugh than to admit she might be right. Ethan didn't smile, but his gaze sharpened. "Answer the question," he said. Amani felt the pressure build, not explosive, but crushing, like the room was closing in from every angle. "I've seen similar language before," she said carefully. "Not a lie. Not the truth. Not enough." "Where?" Ethan asked immediately. Too fast. Too precise. The room leaned in again. Amani's heartbeat picked up. Steady, loud. Impossible to ignore now. She could feel it in her throat, in her fingertips. This was the moment. The line between staying invisible and being exposed. "In another job," she said. "Doing what?" The question snapped. No space to breathe. No space to think. Amani's lips parted, then closed. Silence. That was her answer. And it was the worst one she could give. The shift was instant. "There it is," someone muttered. "She won't answer." "Because there's nothing there," another added. "Or because there's too much," the first voice replied, darker now. "Either way, this is a problem." Ethan's jaw tightened again. Not frustration, calculation. The kind that decided outcomes. "Step outside," he said to her finally. Not loud, not angry, but final. The words hit harder than anything else in the room, because they meant removal, erasure. Amani didn't move right away, not out of defiance, but because her body hadn't caught up yet. This was it. Job gone, reputation gone, whatever fragile stability she had, gone. She nodded once, small, controlled, and turned. The walk to the door felt longer than it should have. Every step echoed. Every breath felt watched. No one spoke as she passed. That silence wasn't neutral. It was judgment. By the time she reached the hallway, the door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than the shattered glass from the night before. The air outside felt colder, thinner. She stood there, hands still, posture straight, as if holding herself together physically could stop everything else from collapsing. Inside, voices rose again, muffled now but urgent. She couldn't hear the words, but she didn't need to. They were deciding her. Not the clause. Not the deal. Her. Minutes passed. Or maybe seconds. Time didn't move normally when everything was on the line. Amani pressed her palm lightly against the cool wall, grounding herself. Breathe in slow. Breathe out steady. Don't fall apart here. Not where they can see. Not where it counts. The door opened suddenly. A man stepped out, one of the executives. His expression was tight, annoyed. He didn't look at her at first, then did. Briefly, dismissively. You've caused quite a situation, he said. Not angry, just inconvenienced, like she was a problem to be removed. Amani held his gaze for a second, then lowered it, not in submission, but in control. I spoke the truth, she said quietly. He let out a short breath, almost a laugh. Truth doesn't matter if you can't prove it, he replied, already turning away. The words stayed. He disappeared down the hall. Amani stood there, alone again, but something inside her had shifted too. Not broken, just exposed. Because for the first time in years, she hadn't stayed silent. And now she had to pay for it. The door behind her remained closed. The decision, whatever it was, hadn't come yet. But she could feel it building on the other side. Heavy, inevitable. And when it did, it wouldn't just cost her this job. It would cost her the one thing she had spent years protecting, her anonymity. Without realizing, someone inside that room had already started to question who she really was. Rain started without warning. Soft at first, then steady, tapping against the long glass panels like a quiet reminder that the world outside still moved, still breathed. Amani stepped out through the service exit, the door closing behind her. With a dull, final sound, the night air was colder than she expected, slipping through the thin fabric of her uniform, settling against her skin. She didn't rush, didn't run, just stood there under the overhang, watching the rain blur the distant lights into something softer, something less defined. Her hands were still steady, but her chest wasn't. Each breath came slower, heavier, like it had to pass through something before it reached her lungs. She pressed her fingers lightly against her wrist, feeling the pulse there, grounding herself. Still here, still standing. That mattered. It had to. A car passed beyond the gates, headlights cutting briefly through the dark, then gone. Just like that, everything moving forward, except her. The echo of voices from inside lingered. Not words, just tones. Doubt, dismissal, suspicion. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the rain fill the silence instead. There was a time she would have apologized, lowered her head, made herself smaller just to survive another day. But something in her had refused this time. Something quiet, stubborn. Something that had been buried too long. Amani exhaled slowly, the air visible now in the cold. Truth doesn't matter if you can't prove it. The words returned not as anger, but as weight. She had known that already, lived it, still chose to speak. Not because it would change anything, but because not speaking would change her. That was the cost no one saw. Inside, the lights of the estate glowed warm, distant, unreachable. Out here, everything felt stripped down to essentials. Breath, cold, heartbeat, honest things. A drop of rain slid from her temple down her cheek, indistinguishable from anything else. She didn't wipe it away, didn't need to. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel it all. The risk, the uncertainty, the quiet fear of what came next. Then she straightened, shoulders lifting just slightly, like reclaiming space no one had given her. Because dignity wasn't loud. It didn't argue. It didn't beg to be seen. It stayed, even when everything else tried to take it. Amani opened her eyes again, looking out into the rain. Not searching for answers, not expecting anything. Just present. And somewhere behind her, beyond the glass and silence, something had shifted in a way she couldn't see yet. Something that was already beginning to follow her, without her realizing how close it had come to. The truth she was trying to leave behind. The room didn't settle after she left. It sharpened. "Pull it up again," Ethan said, voice lower now, stripped of patience. Screens shifted. Fingers moved faster. The claws, small, buried, sat there, exactly where she said it would be. One of the senior analysts leaned forward, zoomed in, reread it once, twice. Then his expression changed. Subtle, but real. "It's not standard," he admitted. Another executive frowned, scrolling through supporting pages. "It looks compliant," he said, defensive. "It reads compliant," the analyst corrected quietly, "but the liability trigger, if interpreted broadly, shifts full exposure to us." Silence. This time it wasn't dismissive. It was uneasy. Ethan's eyes didn't leave the screen. His jaw tightened, not in anger, in recognition. He had seen this before. Not here. Not in this room. Years ago. A different deal. A different night. Rain against glass. A voice, steady, urgent, cutting through noise. He blinked once, slow. "Run the risk model," he said. No one argued now. Data pulled. Projections recalculated. Numbers climbed, then spiked. Quiet gasps. A chair shifted back. "Worst case, we absorb everything," someone muttered. "Best case, we still carry disproportionate exposure." The words landed hard. Not theoretical anymore. Real. Immediate. Ethan straightened slightly, the weight of the room recalibrating around him. Power wasn't loud here. It was precise. "Who drafted this?" he asked. A name was given. Another man in the room stiffened. "It came through their legal team," he said quickly. "We reviewed." "You skimmed?" The analyst cut in, unable to hide it now. The room fractured again, defensive, sharp, shifting blame. But Ethan didn't engage. His focus had moved somewhere else. "Where is she?" he asked suddenly. The question landed wrong. Out of place. A beat of confusion passed through the room. "The maid?" someone said, almost unsure. Ethan didn't respond to the label. His eyes had gone distant, searching memory, aligning details that didn't fit before. The phrasing she used. The way she didn't hesitate. The way she didn't explain too much. Not guessing, recognizing. "Find her," he said. It wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. Down the hallway, the rain had slowed to a fine mist. Amani stood just beyond the overhang now, the damp air clinging to her sleeves. She heard the door open behind her, but didn't turn immediately. She already knew something had changed. Footsteps approached, measured, not rushed. Not security. Not dismissal. Different. Ethan stopped. A few feet behind her. Close enough to speak. Far enough to observe. For a moment, neither said anything. The space between them held more than words could. "You didn't guess," he said finally. Not a question. Amani's shoulders remained still. "No," she replied. Simple. Honest. He stepped closer, the faint scent of rain mixing with the cold air between them. "Where did you learn it?" he asked again. But this time the tone had shifted. Not interrogation. Recognition. Amani exhaled slowly. This was the line she had avoided for years. The one that pulled everything back into the light. She could still step away. Still stay silent. But something in his voice, something in the way the room had changed behind that glass, told her it wouldn't matter anymore. "Abu Dhabi," she said quietly. The words settled between them. Ethan's expression didn't change immediately, but something behind his eyes did. Fast. Precise. He knew that market. Those contracts. Those risks. "Which division?" he asked. Amani hesitated. Just a fraction. Then, "Internal risk review." Silence again. But not the same silence. This one shifted power. Because now he understood. Not just what she said, but who she was. Ethan took a step closer. Close enough now to see the faint scar along her wrist. The one the light caught just right. Something else clicked into place. A memory, blurred, distant, of a hospital hallway. A report he never followed up on. A name he never bothered to remember. Someone who flagged a risk, then disappeared from the system without explanation. He had dismissed it then. Too small. Too insignificant. You left, he said. Not a question. Amani's gaze dropped slightly. I had to. He studied her for a long moment. The uniform, the posture, the silence she carried like armor. None of it matched the profile forming in his mind. Not anymore. Inside, the deal was already collapsing, voices rising, decisions reversing, millions shifting direction because of one line, and one person who saw it. Outside, the power had already moved. Ethan's voice lowered. Do they know? Amani shook her head once. No, he nodded slowly, absorbing it, calculating something deeper now. Not just the deal, but the implication. Because the woman they had dismissed wasn't supposed to be here. Not like this. Not invisible. And if she was right about this, then there was only one reason she stayed hidden. Ethan's gaze sharpened. Slightly. Why didn't you say anything sooner? The question hung there. Amani didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was softer. Because people don't listen to someone like me. The truth of it landed heavier than any accusation. Ethan didn't respond immediately. For the first time, the distance between them felt unstable, like it could shift at any second. Behind them, the glass doors reflected both their figures. One framed in power, one in silence, and neither where they were supposed to be. And in that moment, Ethan realized something far more dangerous than a flawed contract. He hadn't just underestimated her. He had overlooked someone who could dismantle everything he thought he controlled, without him realizing how much of his world now depended on her. The rain had slowed to a soft mist by the time Ethan stepped fully outside, the door closing behind him without a sound. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just stood there, the cold air pressing against him in a way the glass walls never allowed, real, unfiltered. Amani didn't turn. She didn't need to. She could feel the shift in his presence, less sharp, less certain. You were right, he said finally. Not loud. Not performative. Just true. The words settled between them, simple but heavier than anything he had said in that room. Amani's fingers tightened slightly at her sides, but her posture didn't change. She had never expected to hear that. Not from him. Not here. The deal's off, he added after a beat, quieter now. Because of you. There was no pride in it. No edge. Just acknowledgement. Amani exhaled slowly, the tension in her chest easing. Not gone, but different. That's good, she said. Nothing more. No need to claim it. No need to prove anything. Ethan watched her carefully, like he was seeing something for the first time, and realizing how much he had missed before. I misjudged you, he said, the words slower now, deliberate. In that room, and before that, the apology didn't come dressed in excuses. It didn't try to soften itself. It just existed. Amani turned slightly then, just enough for her profile to catch the dim light. Her expression wasn't angry, wasn't relieved either, just steady. You didn't know me, she replied quietly. Not defensive, not forgiving, just honest. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That answer, simple as it was, landed deeper than anything else. Because she was right. He hadn't known her. He hadn't even tried. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence now wasn't tense. It was open. The kind that didn't demand to be filled. You shouldn't be here, he said after a while, not as a dismissal, but as a realization. Amani's gaze drifted back toward the rain, distant. I am, she said softly. There was no bitterness in it. Just fact. Ethan nodded once, slowly. He understood what she meant more than he wanted to admit. This wasn't about where she belonged. It was about what the world allowed people like her to be seen as. He shifted his weight slightly, the damp ground under his shoes unfamiliar. If you ever choose something else, he began, then paused, recalibrating his words. It wouldn't be charity. The offer hung there, careful, restrained. Not a handout. Not control. Just a door. Amani didn't respond right away. Her fingers brushed lightly against her sleeve, grounding herself again. Offers like that came with expectations. with strings, with eyes that watched too closely. She had learned that the hard way. "I didn't speak for that," she said finally. And she meant it. Ethan nodded again, this time without hesitation. "I know." And for the first time, it sounded like he really did. The distance between them remained, but it wasn't the same distance anymore. It wasn't built on dismissal or assumption. It was something quieter, more honest. Amani turned fully then, meeting his gaze just for a moment. Not challenging, not avoiding, just equal. And in that brief exchange, nothing needed to be said, because dignity didn't ask to be recognized. It simply existed, whether anyone saw it or not. She stepped past him then, her shoulder brushing the edge of the space he occupied, light, unforced. No hesitation, no looking back. Ethan didn't stop her, didn't call after her. He just stood there, watching as she moved toward the gate, her figure fading into the soft blur of rain and distant lights. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel in control of the moment. He just felt it, and that was enough. Morning arrived without announcement. Pale light sliding across the marble floors, soft, almost hesitant. The house was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. In the empty dining room, a single glass sat near the edge of the table, unmoved, catching the light just enough to reflect something broken and something still. Ethan stood a few steps away, jacket off, sleeves rolled, staring at nothing in particular. The city beyond the glass walls moved in silence. Cars gliding, people crossing, life continuing without pause. He didn't follow it. On the counter, a folded cloth remained where she had left it, precise, untouched. He reached for it, then stopped, fingers hovering, as if the space still belonged to someone else. Outside the gates, the street carried on, damp from last night's rain. Amani walked without hurry, her figure steady against the soft wind, blending into the rhythm of everything that didn't need to be noticed to exist. No one called her name. No one marked her leaving. But something lingered, quiet, unspoken, like a reflection that stayed even after you looked away. Back inside, Ethan finally moved, but not forward, just enough to catch his own reflection in the glass. For a moment he held it, then looked away first,